afternoon, good evening, where you are right now watching this episode. Welcome to this CAREER4SEA Talk. In this talk, we'll be discussing about the issue of soft skills and the development of soft skills within shipping. Technological evolution affects shipping in many aspects, but most importantly for its people, and especially the seafarers working on board ships. Technical competencies in this era may not be enough, and a unique set of multidimensional skills is needed to overcome challenges. Critical thinking, teamwork, resilience, communication, flexibility, problem-solving skills, and so on and so forth are some of the soft skills required for this new generation and for all of us to move forward. So has the industry, let's say, realized the power of soft skills? What do we have to do as an industry to raise the awareness and to implement, let's say, best practices? We'd like to discuss the development of soft skills in the market. And in order to do that, we have assembled the skill of experts, global experts. And I would like to introduce these experts to you. We are joined in this panel by Catherine Nelson. Catherine is the director for UK Merchant Navy Training Board. We have Adam Lewis. Adam is the head of training and operations for IMEC. We have Katerina Skurtaniotti, who is the managing director of Venlis. And last but not least, we have Hans Henderson. Hans is the professor of practice at the Department of Mechanics and Maritime Sciences for Chalmers University of Technology. I would like to welcome you all in this talk, and I would like to start the discussion with our, let's say, first discussion point. I would like to I would like to hear your thoughts on how has shipping realized the power of soft skills, and what are your views towards that end? Where do we stand as an industry? Catherine.
Thank you, Apostolos. I do believe that the shipping industry has identified the need for soft skills, and I do believe they realize the importance of it. We're doing a lot of work with the Merchant Navy Training Board in developing soft skills and raising the awareness for companies, because this is what they're looking for. We can't design programs and training for jobs that don't yet exist. So we're developing things that already exist, and that is looking into soft skill development. And they're the transferable skills, and it's important that we develop those so that seafarers have the opportunity to be able to move into different parts of the sector, different industries. And I think that's the most important thing. And it's with the COVID crisis, I think what we've done is we've actually enhanced the ability for those young seafarers to develop their soft skills. They're working independently much more now because they're doing online training. So I really do feel very strongly that we have identified the need for the development of soft skills. And I really do believe as well that they are the easiest to develop.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I think certainly we have identified the importance of soft skills, but I think also we need to recognise actually how hard it is to apply them on board. And if I just take an initial skill at the beginning of personnel management, now a lot of people are sure can't even get this right at the moment or struggle with it. And it's quite hard, I think, to turn from a technical manager into a personnel manager, which a lot of us have to do. But of course, on board, it's a very dynamic situation. You know, your staff are living there, but they're on contracts, they're coming in and out. You might have staff from different nationalities who have different career aspirations. So I think there is a lot to do still. There's a lot to improve on things like HR skills, management skills on board. But we also have to recognise that it is a very unique situation on board, and we have to train people to be sort of dynamic much more than they have to be in a shoreside role. Thank you.
Thank you. Katerina? Katerina, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So I absolutely agree. The past decade, we can observe a change, especially the last 3-4 years. Well, we first have the human element from IMO at the end of the last century till now, and the focus on soft skills was gradually increasing. As Catherine said, in around 2012-13, if you don't have the need of non-technical skills, you don't develop them. And in around 2022, we have developed some modules about non-technical skills, but the industry was quite reluctant. Now, the actual accelerator is the pandemic, since we see people being the protagonistic in many aspects. I think everything begins with the level of safety culture and the people's perception around safety. So we are going to need more and more to put our focus on people and about human element and the needs, what we need to do about them.
Okay. Hans, your thoughts on where we stand as an industry?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my perception is that some organization has, but many has not, which I think the accident and incident reports indicate. There are certainly some good initiatives where shipping companies have set up their own training facilities and made agreements with existing training facilities to improve the situation. However, change must come step by step to be accepted, and we must start with the leaders, because without their full commitment, it's very difficult to benefit from the tools of soft skills. And I'm involved in a research right now where we try to, it's called the Future Leadership in the Maritime Industry, where we've interviewed all categories on board ships. And when we interviewed officers, we have a few cases who have told us that, well, everybody in the team have been on a course on soft skills, bridge resource management or similar. But the captain doesn't allow us to use it. So this is a problem. We need to start with the leaders. That's my suggestion.
Okay. I would like to ask, going back to what Catherine and both Katerina and Catherine, I think, mentioned, I would like to ask, what are the drivers and barriers towards soft skill development? Soft skill was not an issue in the industry, let's say 10 years ago. Certainly it was not an issue 20 years ago. So, but we've seen a growing importance. So in your view, what are the drivers and barriers? You mentioned, I think, both of you, maybe all of you mentioned, with the exception of Hans, you mentioned the effect of the pandemic. Pandemic is an issue in these days, absolutely. But other than the pandemic, what sort of barriers and drivers you see towards, this soft skill, let's say, need to the market? Catherine.
Thank you. I mean, in the UK, you start developing your soft skills from the word go when you start your early reception years at school. They develop them, and I think that is the most important thing. We need to continue to develop them all the way through our life, because without the soft skills, we can't sell ourselves for future employers. We can't choose future employers. We can't communicate properly, and you might be the brightest person on the earth with the most incredible qualifications, but if you don't have the communication skills to sell that talent, then we're wasting our time. So it's very, very important that we incorporate the skills within the learning that we do. So it's not just a case of having a course for Helm or management leadership. It's about being able to apply soft skills to every single thing that we're doing within the industry. And I think that is the way we build our soft skills. So developing it for the future, I think, is the best way forward.
Adam, your thoughts on the drivers and barriers towards these soft skills?
Yeah, I think we're certainly starting with one barrier. I think we also have to look at how we recruit people and train people. Now, let me use an example actually away from maritime. And I know I've made a lot of comparisons in the past between the space industry and shipping because of the remoteness. Now, if we look what happened there, what used to happen is they used to get the hardest, strongest people they could and send them up to space. And to the point where people are almost having fights up in the space station. Now they only let someone go up if they know they can be a team player and they can get on with people for 6 months at a time. And I almost see that's the transition we're going through. Certainly with some VAR cadet training, you know, there's been a lot of cultural elements where people have been trained that you've got to be very tough, you've got to have a stiff upper lip, you've got to keep all your emotions to yourself. And I think there's been a lot of drivers over the last few years, not just because of the COVID pandemic, but there's been a lot more of mental health and people being a lot more open and talkative. So I think those are certainly the drivers. So we've got to look, I think, from the recruitment process upwards. Are we recruiting the right people into the industry? Are we setting the right dynamics on board? And I think some comes into formal training as well.
Okay, Katerina?
Yes, I think the big driver nowadays is the unknown condition. So the human performance is and will be always the big wager of the future. We have development of the technology, but without the human performance, the human element, all this will be an empty envelope without the expected results. So we have to focus on non-technical skills. We can say that in order to have, let's say, smart shipping or sustainable shipping, the industry will require smart people or seafarers equipped with proper skills in order to check, to understand, to interface, to perform effectively with new conditions, automation, like, for example, advanced procedures. So honestly, I think we go straight to non-technical skills and more.
Okay, I'm going back to Hans, because I think the key word mentioned by Catherine was the employability. In order to be employable in the future, you have to develop this. This is, you know, it's inevitable. But I would like to go back to Hans, because Hans mentioned in his initial statement, Hans, I would like to hear from you about the resistance from the industry. We may train, we may, let's say, develop these skills with the people, but how ready are we as an industry to accept these and let them, you know, have these skills in real life? Hans, your thoughts? Any sort of, you see any sort of barriers, or maybe even drivers for the soft skills, you know, push?
Well, what I've seen is that we need to go away from the control and compliance culture and look at how procedures are written. Many procedures are written to cover the backs of shoreside managers, and that must go away. I see that as a big problem. The drivers is, of course, we must select the right leaders and train our leaders properly. And where I worked before, we psychologically assessed all leaders, and we trained them before they were allowed to become leaders. And that had a great impact. And it also shows on board when we do our visits on board that some ships have really, really good performance in applying those soft skills.
Okay, I think it's what you mentioned also fits well with the shift of the industry between safety 1 and safety 2. Instead of focusing to what is done, you know, wrong and what the problems are, maybe focusing to what works well. So that shift, I'm sure, helped, among other things, for the introduction of these leadership and the soft skills and the acceptance from the market. And I understand what you say, that we have to move forward beyond the compliance culture of the industry. I understand that. I would like to ask now, how do you feel that the industry is assessing these sort of, let's say, skill gaps? And how is the industry assisting seafarers, assisting, you know, people within the industry to get these soft skills? Are we successful? Are we less successful? What needs to be done? Your thoughts on how the industry is assessing that, and how is the industry handling that? Catherine.
Thank you. We're doing a lot of work with our shipping companies. When we design training programs and update training programs, we can't be working in silos. We have to work with the end user. We have to work with the people that are employing the cadets at the end of it, the seafarers at the end of it, because their view and what they need for the future is absolutely key. So we work very, very closely with the shipping companies. And what we found is that the shipping companies have specific requirements when it comes to the soft skill side. So, you know, more and more they're looking for seafarers that have a good business acumen. They're looking for, you know, common sense. How does what they do on board the ship affect business? How does what they do on board the ship affect the environment? So they are looking for, and you can't not necessarily always train people in soft skills. You can give them a direction in which to travel with developing their soft skills. But, you know, a lot of these soft skills are inherent in each of us. So it's really important that we develop what we have and grow what we have. And that's why it's so important to start right from the word go, from, you know, an early age, to develop it, because it becomes automatic. But I think working with the shipping companies definitely makes a difference, and we can easily then identify what it is that they want from their seafarers.
Okay. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I would thoroughly agree with Catherine that response has to come from the shipping companies. And I know a lot of shipping companies are doing this. And I think perhaps the way to drive forward would be a lot more collaboration between companies and perhaps big data. And the reason I say that is because I've seen this done with quite high success, actually, again, coming out of maritime, but with Google. And Google used big data to go right across their offices with all their managers, all their employees, to actually assess soft skills. And from that, they were able to come up with 5 traits of actually what a good manager is. And I've just written down here. So in their eyes, a good manager is a good coach. Someone empowers the team, doesn't micromanage. Someone who creates an inclusive team environment, is results orientated, and is a good communicator. So that was a fantastic result from their sort of big data exercise. So I think as an industry, if we want to grow, if we want to go into this sort of high level, which I know we're going to talk about, but I think there might be a possibility to use a lot more collaboration between different companies rather than in isolation, and perhaps use big data to try and actually look at exactly what's happening on board and how we develop strategies going forward.
Cannot agree more on what you said, because it's my feeling that as an industry, and I fully agree with Catherine, we cannot work in silos. As an industry, we don't have any sort of structured way of assessing the, let's say, the weaknesses we have towards that. And then if we're not assessing, as you correctly said, they had a procedure, let's say a process over there in Google. They had to assess, and then they had to develop. So as an industry, I think we have to do more. Katerina, your thoughts?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you, actually, Apostolos, that
Coming up, what
we are constantly, we are constantly working on this with shipping companies, but I would definitely say that even though we observe growth in terms of identification of soft skills in the industry, at least the majority of shipping companies, they have no systematic tracking, a strong link between day-to-day work performance and training effectiveness. We need a fast-growing mindset in the shipping industry. We need research, proper mapping of safety culture of the company. And actually, we have done this with many, many companies. The findings are indeed fascinating. They're all about non-technical skills. So I think the company needs from safety culture mapping. We have noticed many gaps, and now they need to, after the assessment, to set goals, to follow them, to take proper actions, to monitor, and again to reassess. There needs to be a more structured way for this.
Okay, may I ask, as you're working with your clients, and we just have to be honest, you work with a number of clients, but actually this is a small fraction of the whole market, because the whole market has more than 4,000, maybe 5,000 ship operators. You may work with a very small fraction of them, and I can assure everyone who is listening to this, these are the top tier. Okay, we're talking about the top tier. Why? Because the top tier are those who are innovators, who are trying to improve beyond compliance. This is how it is. So I would like to ask you, without giving us any names, if you assess them from 1 to 10, let's say, how fast? Because you mentioned the process. You have to do some mapping, and then you have to do this and this and this. how fast do you see these clients moving through this process? And maybe how you would assess these efforts, let's say from 1 to 10. So your thoughts on this?
Well, not fast as they want, to be honest, because we have the most regulated industry in the world. They don't want to put more pressure and to the seafarers and to the procedures. They need to do some things, but what I think is missing is the milestone, you know, to set the goal. And you need the vision, you need someone to take you from the hand, let's say, and do that. And it's not so quick as they want to. But I see change the last 2 years. We noticed change. We noticed that they actually want to do, they believe more in this. And I think this is good, very good. I cannot give you a number though. Okay.
The whole question was about asking you to assess in
Yeah.
your own words. There's no point in, I'm just, if I give numbers, it's easier maybe to assess from 1 to 3, from 1 to 10, and so on and so forth.
They want to be assessed more and more, actually. And now we actually reassess companies from 2016-17, and the findings are amazing, amazing, really.
It's good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Hans, given your past, you know, enormous experience with the Sea Smart, one of the leading training centers in the world, and your current position, of course, and the whole career you've been in shipping, and what is your views towards these, you know, assessment gaps? How do you think is the industry should move forward?
Well, when I worked at Sea Smart, we talked to, or we got help from the KLM airlines to develop assessments, and every officer and captain, chief engineers and engineers were assessed on a almost yearly basis on the skills on handling a crisis on board. And in the beginning, they didn't like it. But when they realized we were not there to kill them, we were there to help them, then they really wanted to come for those assessments. They saw that they grew in professionalism. And it was really great to see. And even those who were not successful, we gave them a second chance. They stayed for 1 or 2 more weeks and they became successful. And they were very grateful. I'm much better captain now, and so on. So this is good, but you have to, I would say, level the assessment so it doesn't become too much. So it depends on what shipping company we are working with in that case.
Okay. Again, coming back to what you said about the shipping company, how about the industry? SCCW is not covering any sort of, not that type of, I mean, SCCW mentions leadership and some other things, but not necessarily many of the other soft skills we're talking about. How about, you know, you mentioned the ship operators. I think all of you mentioned ship operators, to be honest. How about the industry? Should we raise the bar? What do you think?
Sorry.
Catherine, you go on.
Yeah, no, you know, I'm really a strong believer in STCW being a basic standard. And it's about what we add to that basic standard. And that's critical when we're developing cadet training. We look above and beyond compliance so that we prepare our seafarers for a future at sea or on shore, whichever they prefer. But I think the challenge lies when you've got a company that's willing to invest time and energy and money into building your career. That's great if you've got a company that's willing to do that. But there are many, many companies out there who are not. So it's about trying to encourage companies to see the value in their seafarers, because it's only the development by the shipping companies that can build the seafarer of the future. I really do believe that the colleges and the maritime training establishments can educate to a certain level. But after that, it's the responsibility, I believe strongly, of the individual and the shipping company in developing that career and professional development along that.
Okay. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Catherine on both accounts. First of all, STCW is basic, which we need to go on top of that. And also there is a lot that has to be done at company level. And certainly this is one thing we see by a lot of leading companies. You know, you only have to step foot in Manila and you see some of these massive training centers there, and you realize that actually they're not teaching to basic STCW standards. They're looking far beyond that, and sort of company standard as well. I think what I would probably add on top of that is soft skill development is probably the most powerful tool in terms of retention of seafarers. There's, you know, I always hear at conferences that people will move for, you know, $1,000 extra here or a bit more leave here. But I suspect if we went down to the root cause why people leave companies, it's how they're treated on board, it's how they're treated by the companies, and it's how they feel as an individual. So if we were to develop this, I could almost guarantee, without seeing the data, I could almost guarantee this would be the most powerful tool that companies have in their back pocket for retention.
Yeah, among other things, yeah. Katerina, your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm covered from the previous speakers, but we have also well, it started as a pressure from oil companies. Don't forget about this. We have some amazing initiatives, as you very well know, resilience, for example, that make a huge difference in all this, and the focus on non-technical skills. It helped enormously to put the focus on the human. Things like mental health and well-being about the seafarers, and was also very well noticed. And don't forget about the crew changes, the difficulty of this, how it helped, or it's high importance that seafarers are supported with these skills.
Yeah, fully agree. And been myself in the market for many years, and I do understand what you're saying. And we have to be honest with ourselves, among other things. And because Hans is bringing the table his experience, for example, with Sea Smart. I've said in the past, Sea Smart may be the best training center in the world, not because it's the best because of this and this and that, but the operator behind it. It's a big cruise company who has a lot of people to train, and they have to carry people, which is the most sensitive cargo. So in that sense, they have raised the bar themselves. They're not expecting for STCW or anyone else to come forward and say this and this. I fully agree with Catherine. STCW is a minimum basic, absolutely, yes. But I fully understand, Katerina, what you said about the resilience and the initiatives by oil majors who have pushed the agenda forward. And more or less, I'm not saying they forced, but more or less they make it impossible for anyone who is not investing in these, let's say, standards to stay in the market, on the top tier of the market. So I fully understand what you're saying, that the industry has moved forward, especially these last 5-6 years, especially these 2-3 years, with that. I do understand what you're saying. Hans, your thoughts?
Well, I can see there are problems, and I see one of the major issues that we have, and that we need to put an end to is the culture of victimization, harassment, and bullying. Because many young seafarers, both male and female, they end their career after only one contract on board, because they have been exposed to this very harsh culture. So I think that needs to end. And we could also see another side, what we should implement to attract new seafarers. I think every shipping company should have a specific competency framework and promotion criteria developed for their specific needs. Because if you visualize the path from cadet to captain and chief engineer, it will facilitate recruitment of new students and retention of existing officers and engineers. So that's my view on that.
Okay. Then you make it for me easier to go to the next round, because what you said, starting with Catherine, and Catherine said there's a minimum, there's a basic level, and then it's the responsibility of the ship managers. It's more or less what you said, Hans. And my question is, are we asking too much out of these ship operators? There are huge operators operating, let's say, in excess of 50 ships, and it's not too many. I think it's approximately 200, 220 operators operating in excess of 50 ships. But there is a majority of the market operating 15 ships or less, 10 ships. So it's not all of them big. So my question is, are we asking too much out of them? Hans mentioned competency standards. You mentioned retention criteria. All of you more or less mentioned about the ongoing. Catherine said we have to, we expect from these operators to raise the standards and so on and so forth. So, Catherine, are we too much out of these operators? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. We all understand that the bottom line financially for the companies is the most important thing. They have to make money, they have to survive, they have to exist, and it becomes more and more challenging. And it has been, particularly over the COVID crisis. But what I think they're starting to realize is that if they invest in their staff, they get loyalty, they get better performance. Diversity as well is another huge thing that's coming our way, and we're changing a culture on things like diversity. It's important and shipping companies do, some of them do. There's always better performers than others, and there's nothing we can do about that. But what we need to do is keep raising the awareness that if you really invest in your staff, you get much better performance and much better from them. And it's about including them in some form of succession planning and giving them the impetus to want to develop. One of the most important things for me when you're introducing young people into the industry is making sure they have a clear career path ahead of them and developing easy routes into certain parts of the industry and through different sectors, and working with the shipping companies that we can develop that. So succession planning and building that succession planning is hugely important. Yeah,
absolutely. Adam?
Yeah, I think one of the problems that a lot of shipping companies have now is that a career at sea isn't a long career anymore. And if you talk to a young person, even cadet, third officer level, and you ask them when they want to be ashore, it's probably 10, 12 years. So the problem a lot of shipping companies have got is your older generation has left the sea. You've got this new generation who only want to be at sea for 10 years. So if you're looking at succession planning, then you might have a young person that you need to get up to sort of say senior officer level within a matter of about 10 years, plus get them enough experience to go to, let's say, captain or chief engineer. So that's a huge task for shipping companies, that they have to get all their technical skills and all that experience in quite a short window. So even though I do agree with Catherine that it's certainly a responsibility of the companies, I think we've got to be aware that there's actually not much time to do it. Now that's a problem. Perhaps another solution is that I think the industry needs to be a bit more open about taking on older candidates to go to sea. Certainly, if I look at my experience, I joined at the turn of the millennium. I went to sea at 19 and I was old at that point. I think had I gone to sea probably 25, 26, I think I would have spent a lot longer at sea. I would have made a lot more mature decision. So my point is actually, if we're open to taking on older candidates, we don't need to be worried about how long they're going to spend at sea, because we know they're probably only going to spend 10, 12 years or at a maximum. But what it does mean is that we can bring experience from other industries. They might come in with 5, 6 years experience, soft skills from other organisations, other industries, that they can bring in and start to filter into our industry, which will make it so much more the better.
That's a very interesting idea, I would say. May I ask, Adam, do you by any chance have any sort of data on how many years they stay at sea? Any sort of data, depending on different nationalities, maybe? I'm just asking because I haven't seen any sort of, no one has any sort of data Because you mentioned they're going to stay at sea maybe 10, 12 years. Catherine, maybe you have some sort of data. I'm not sure. May I ask specifically, do you have any sort of these data? Adam?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that powerful at the moment. So we did a data exercise about 8 years ago now, mostly between Asia Pacific areas and sort of Eastern Western Europe. But at that point, we wanted to assess junior officers and cadets and how long they wanted to spend at sea. There was a slight variation between Europe and Asia, which isn't probably unsurprising. Most Europeans wanted to be sea around about 31, 32, and it was about 4 years later for people from Asia Pacific. Now, of course, it's very easy at cadet level to say, yes, I'm going to be captain by then. So we've got to manage expectations, but certainly having done a trip at sea, that was where their mindset was.
Yeah. Catherine, any sort of data from your end? Yes.
Yeah, we've done some research with our stakeholders, and that, you know, and what we've noticed is that as time's gone on, the length of time that seafarers are at sea is actually getting shorter, and that's purely and simply because there are more opportunities for them on shore. And as we look at things like autonomous vessels and autonomous shipping, what we're seeing is we're seeing a transition, because I really do believe that before you have anybody who's going to operate a ship autonomously, you need to have someone who understands how it works in real life. And I will always stand by that statement. And I think that one of the most important things is there are more opportunities opening up. And I also think as well, we're developing more opportunities in other sectors in maritime as well, which is another important thing. So that's actually a good thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one, I was amazed. I was once in London attending a conference, and there was a guy, brigadier, I think, from the Royal Air Force, and he stated that when they fly these drones, a normal plane, they will take them 2 pilots, but if they fly a drone on a mission, they need 4 pilots. So you need more people to operate unmanned ships than you need them with the manned option. And I fully agree with what you said. There's more options over there. Yeah, absolutely. Katerina, your thoughts?
I agree with Adam that there is a difference between Europeans and Asians about how long they are staying. Well, I believe that the shipping industry will have to invest in this, in innovate actions, in research, because everything keeps going on and on. So one of the key challenges is the need to ensure that the seafarers are properly trained, are properly skilled, with the rapid evolution of technology and the condition presence of commercial developments. So the post-pandemic era will set new regulations, definitely. And all these changes need to create the focus, need to focus on human capital. Therefore, to improve their adaptability, to sustain, to cope with all this evolving environment of our industry. It's constantly.
Hans, your thoughts? Are we asking too much of these ship operators? And maybe your thoughts on the period of people staying at sea, pursuing a career at sea?
Well, I think if you could make it more attractive to stay at sea, and I think what I said before, you need to have you have to visualize the path from cadet to captain to see what kind of steps do I need to take. That will encourage people to try to take the next step. And on top of that, I think we need to train our leaders on board to be good mentors and coaches, because I think on-board training is not as good as it could be. People don't know how to be a coach. They don't know how to be a good mentor. And I have seen myself good mentors and coaches on board the ships I have been training on. And that makes a big, big difference. And if you had good mentors and good coaches on board, shoreside training could be reduced, or it could be a good complement. So that's my view.
Okay. I would like to ask now on what you said about this, how we are teaching and how we are developing these soft skills. May I ask, how about this onboard training? The onboard training in the majority of the ship operators is dominated by regulatory required, sessions, to put it in that sense. How about these soft skills? Mentorship is one of these tools available to our seafarers to develop their skills when they are on board. How do you see this onshore and onboard training, and how do you see this mix to be, developed as we move forward? Catherine.
I think one of the most important elements, I think, of training on board has to be the relationship between the seafarer and the machinery that they're using. And I think that the relationship between those two things, we need to start looking at more closely. We're developing new technology constantly. And I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question or going completely off track here, but I really feel very strongly that the relationship that we develop on board has to be much stronger when it comes to new technology development, because that will then transfer to the shore side. And we're constantly, I mean, I was involved in new build work in my previous life, and the new technology that they're developing constantly is really incredible. But, when you see the young people coming on board, they're really all singing, all dancing, very capable. But the older generation and the people that have already been on the vessels, they get left behind very rapidly. So it's about making sure that they keep their skills updated, and learning lessons from other industries is a huge part of that. So, we shouldn't be afraid to ask for advice from people like the aviation industry and the way they measure competency, because it's about constantly keeping up to date with it. It changes so quickly and it becomes so obsolete so quickly that's, I think, one of the most important factors here.
I'll have this will be my next question, and I would like to keep it as a separate question about what experience can we bring into this industry from other industries. Let's focus on the seaboard now in this round of questions. Adam, how about seaboard and onshore training? How this should be, or maybe, let's say, diversified in the future? What do you think?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think certainly as far as onboard training is concerned, we know there's an amazing opportunity to learn on board, and certainly with a lot more mobile technology now and things like virtual reality, there's much more training that can be done on board. I think one of the problems when it comes to soft skills, and we're talking about mentoring and coaching, is the problem is if someone goes to sea, there's an expectation, they know what they're letting themselves in for, they have to know that technical knowledge. So anything under STCW, when they go to college, they have to know that. The problem with soft skills is we can't push that on someone. They've got to want to do it. So we could put them through a 4-day coaching course, tick a box, but if they're not the sort of person who wants to coach, then that's a waste of time. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have when we talk about soft skills. So again, if we want to develop this forward, it might have to come down to the recruitment process. And I hate things like personality profiling, but perhaps that has a role to play. Perhaps we need to look at people who are good mentors or are good coaches and are good leaders, rather than just look at technical skills.
Adam, by any chance, do you see that technology may assist toward that? And meaning specifically, one of the side effects of COVID, we've seen this boom with video conferencing. Given that we have better communications and shipshore connectivity, do you think that this may let's say, assist towards improving things with the coaching and the mentoring and the shipshore connection, etc.?
Well, I think it comes down to two things. I mean, first of all, I'll go back to the point where someone's got to want to do it. There's got to be a will there. So, there's always going to be that element. I think when we talk about connectivity and higher technology, one of the things we also know is that people at sea, there's such a sort of high burden of expectations of them on their workload that people don't have time to coach and don't have time to mentor all the time. And this is where technology might help. So if there's a good relationship between man and machine, and that frees up some of the workload burden, then perhaps people have got more time for this mentoring coaching.
Yeah. going back to what Catherine said, because Catherine started from there. So, Katerina, your thoughts, onshore seaboard, training.
Well, difficult. To be honest, I changed my mind after pandemic. Well, during this pandemic, I always believed that, especially when it comes in terms of non-technical skills, soft skills, you need to speak to them. You need, the approach is different, completely different. Now, with the pandemic that we are experiencing a unique condition, that demand changed, we need to adjust, we need to be more flexible. So we started to have this training on board or virtual actually. It was different. It needed special adjustments, but it worked. But I would like here to mention culture. And when I mean culture, I mean Asian, Europeans, they adjust to this very different. For example, the Filipinos were very open to this, were more flexible to this. On the contrary, the Europeans, like Ukrainians and all, were more strict to this. So we need to adjust. I truly believe that either we change, transform, especially when it comes to human factor, or we stay behind. This is my logo these days, to be honest.
Okay. Hans, your thoughts on the seaboard and the onshore training?
Yeah, absolutely. We introduced already several years ago at SeaSmart something called line instructors, where we employed senior officers who could divide their working time between sailing on board and being instructor ashore. And this setup, which we practiced for several years, provide excellent onboard training and up-to-date instructors ashore. So we benefited from that very much. However, you need to train those people ashore to become good coaches and mentors. You cannot just pick a good officer and think that he can do everything without training to be an instructor. So I believe the onboard training can develop quite a lot.
Okay, so there's a room for improvement, let's say, over there. Now, my next question, how about best practices and lessons to be learned or experience to be transferred from other industries? Catherine, the floor is yours. You started with the competency models. What else?
Yeah, we've looked at simulator training, because simulator training is the way of the future as far as I'm concerned with cadet training. And with cadet berths becoming more and more challenging to find, particularly in this pandemic, we've been developing a simulator training program for bridge watchkeeping skills. And we've worked very closely with the flag state, with the British flag state, the MCA. And it's really important that, and we worked very closely actually with the automobile industry, particularly with Rolls-Royce and with British Airways, looking at their models of repetition, competency, and actually, why reinvent the wheel when you can pick up on other people's successes? So what we've done is we've developed a really great program that actually offers the opportunity for cadets to be able to revisit and replay and experience situations that are impossible to be able to reenact on a real ship, a real vessel safely. So by developing a new technology in the training sphere, we are definitely going to improve competency levels and success rates for cadets when they're doing their training, without a shadow of a doubt. It's been very successful so far.
Okay. Adam?
Yeah, I think this comes back into one of the earlier points where I was saying about the industry needs to be open to taking people as a second or third career from other industries. And certainly when we move into this new technological age, or the fourth industrial revolution as it's known, I think we've got to realise that we're entering an era where we don't have the expertise in-house within our industry to sort out these issues. So, you know, a lot of, and I take the example of British universities, they're quite well set up because, of course, they're not just maritime. If I look at my old university, Solent University. There's a lot of expertise you can gain from there. But when we look at issues such as cybersecurity, you know, perhaps we need to realise that we need to recruit people who have got degrees and past experience in other industries, and we can attract them. We know we can do it because we pay well. There's, you know, a lot of benefits going to sea, especially at the moment. So I think we can solve this problem quite openly by just being open to second or third careers in the industry, rather than just thinking all the time that we need to recruit 18-year-olds and train them up in-house.
Okay, just to provoke a little bit, let's say, has the aviation industry, is the aviation industry open in getting, you know, second and third chances to pilots, let's say? How about that?
Well, certainly from the UK, and I must admit I'm not an expert on this, but yes, they are. But I think there is a huge difference that, and again, I'm generalising from what I see in the UK. If you want to be a pilot in the UK, someone like BA isn't likely to say, oh, you know, you've just finished high school, we're going to pay for your training. Usually it comes from rich parents, you pay for the training yourself, you waive your private pilot's license. So I think that's the big difference. You know, the maritime industry is investing in someone from an early age, which is a huge risk. So it's slightly different, I would say.
It's an interesting, you know, thought-provoking model, what you said, giving second and third chances, etc. So it's always, you know, nice to accept and maybe investigate new ideas. Yes, Catherine, yes.
We're seeing a lot of people coming into the industry in the age of 25, 26, who've maybe done something completely different and wanted to do something new and refreshing. And actually, that's actually really encouraging. And actually their longevity in the industry is much longer. You know, they stay in the industry much longer than the younger students. So that's quite an interesting topic to discuss and you know, explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Katerina, your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with the simulator training. We have started this before the pandemic, but now, of course, this kind of training is in our lives every day. But what we have noticed this year is the need to personalize training needs and to identify first the training needs and to have a more focused training. And what we do this year, we connect the effectiveness of training with this. And this is like a cycle. So you have a training, let's say, question before, then you have the training, then again you have after a questionnaire, then after 3-4 months you do interviews, and then you do exactly the same training. You do the amendments and you monitor. I find this year this kind of training very effective, and I think this is also a huge gap in the industry. So yes, simulated training, effectiveness of training, and towards to personalize needs as best practice, I will say, for this year.
Okay, Hans, your thoughts?
Yes, I fully agree with Katerina in this, and I think simulated training is the way forward, but combined with onboard training and onboard follow-ups, which we did quite a lot, because it's one thing to be on a simulator and then applying it on board. It's a different thing. So that's where you need help, either by a company instructor who comes on board, or the person from the facility where you trained. But I think it's better if you have let's say, a fleet captain or line instructor who do the follow-up and help the bridge team or engine team to apply all those skills that you have practiced on the simulator. Because we see that if you don't do that, only 20% or so of the skills that you have learned on the simulator are actually used on board. So I strongly advocate for a onboard, I would say, follow-up to consolidate the learning.
May I ask just a quick question? Why do you think it's such a small percentage of the skills tested on a simulator being affected on board?
Well, I think when you come back to your normal environment, you go back to your old habits very easily, and it's difficult to apply those things if you don't get help. And even if we do try to simulate very well on the simulator, it does not transfer into the real world as much as we would like to.
Yeah.
And research has shown that this is the case as well.
Yeah. Because it's a very protected and secure environment, the simulator. In real life is exactly what you said. It's not. Okay, now it's time to wrap up the panel. I would like to ask you one last question. I would like to give you, let's say, 30 seconds, maybe a phrase or something. I would like to ask you if you could change one thing that would have either an immediate or a profound impact to boost, let's say, the development of soft skills across the industry. Change one thing. What would it be, that thing, and why? Let's say 30 seconds. Catherine, your thoughts.
Oh, that's a difficult one, isn't it?
It's a wish list, to put it in that sense. What's your wish list, let's say?
My wish list, I think that you learn a lot from an individual. I've learned all the way through my life, and in my career, I've had a mentor. And if we have mentors on board vessels, and we've talked today about it, if we have mentors for every single young person coming on board, our retention rate for seafarers will go through the ceiling.
Adam said that. Yeah, fully agree. Yeah. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've got to agree with Catherine there. I think your mentoring and coaching, not only for retention, but there's some fantastic knowledge at sea. So by people coaching others, there's going to be some great knowledge transfer there. So I think adopting a culture of coaching on board would be a fantastic thing to see.
Okay, thank you, Katerina.
Wow, difficult. I think I will tell the seafarer that is very free to report. Okay, I will start with this. So to report everything and to adjust, to be flexible, and to adjust and to be flexible. I think this is what I will change for the seafarer immediately, to open his mind, to be more open in this.
Okay. Hans?
I think that we need to introduce something called psychological safety on board. And it is the leader's responsibility to introduce this thing. And it is expressed by Timothy Clark as a condition in which you feel included, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge the status quo, all without fear being embarrassed or marginalized. Psychological safety is pretty young science. It was Amy Edmondson in the United States who came up with research in this in the late 90s, looking into hospitals. And I think this is the way forward.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it's a fantastic book, by the way. And I think it will be becoming as an idea, because the idea set over there with the 4 levels of the psychological safety and so on and so forth are absolutely vital to what we discuss here. And I would like to thank you for mentioning it. We've done a presentation of the book in the past in CAREER4SEA, but it's a fantastic book, and it's a very, I would say, very strong idea of how to move forward, especially in these safety critical environments we work with ships. So I would like to thank you all for bringing your ideas to this discussion. I would like to thank all our viewers. And we trust we'll see you in one of our future talks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Apostles.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.